Welcome to Satsunami. Hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of Satsunami. I'm Satsunami, and joining me today is the patron saint of sandwiches in this very festive season. He has happily agreed to jingle into the fray with me to discuss this Christmas classic, as it were. It is the one, the only Adam. Adam, welcome back.
Hello. Season's greetings to one and all. I also consider myself the booster to your Turbo Man.
Oh, you are not the booster. Nobody likes booster.
No, nobody likes booster.
My God, that is one of my favourite running jokes. But before we jump the gun and get into what we're talking about today, how are you doing in this very festive period?
I'm doing not too bad, thanks. I'm just trying to stay warm, desperately scrape together the coppers to buy all the Christmas presents. But apart from that, not too bad. How about yourself?
Yep, you and me both. Trying to get that last minute Christmas shopping in, trying to get that Turbo Man doll that my loved ones have all been saying. You know, they say, Satsu, you gotta get us a Turbo Man, and I've been rushing from shop to shop.
You ever find that, though, when you're rushing from shop to shop and then you get yourself into a bit of a fracas and then you see somebody grabbing two and you're like, he got two! He got two!
I was actually out shopping today, and my God, it was like I wouldn't be surprised if they had like a riot shield guy standing at the door, just like ushering people in, being like, "No, you can only have one." Judge Dredd walking the aisles. It is pandemonium. It is absolutely crazy. Although there's plenty of turkeys, I can safely say that. Yeah, we were told that there was going to be a shortage of turkeys, and I don't know. I think they all fled here because there's loads of them. Christmas is indeed in full swing. So yeah, very festive all around. And yeah, as you could tell by I say this every time, but our very subtle references, today we are indeed going to be talking about the one, the only, the incredible Jingle All the Way. Last year, we did quite a few Christmas-themed episodes, and one of them was, of course, our top 5 Christmas films, wasn't it?
Yep, indeed. The most happy of episodes.
Oh, it was a great episode, though. But of course, one that ranked on our top 5 was indeed Jingle All the Way. I can't actually remember what level or what ranking we gave it. I think it was probably 5.
I think it was 4, to be honest. Actually, I think Die Hard got 5, and I think Jingle All the Way got 4.
And this is a film that I have to admit is one of these films that I grew up with, and I'm guessing you grew up. Well, of course, you would have grown up with it as well. Yeah, it's a film that I've never really thought much of. I've enjoyed it. I've watched it like every Christmas period. Obviously, thanks to the advent of the internet, you've got so many people now who are like, "Oh, this film's terrible," and it's an absolute disgrace. But is it safe to say that you grew up like watching this film as well and enjoying it?
No, it is not safe to say I grew up with this.
Oh, really?
I didn't watch this film until my teenage years. I actually can't remember how old I was, but I was in high school before I watched this. In fact, it might have even been early years of university for me. It was much later that I am a huge Arnie fan, but this is one that I hadn't, unless I did see it when I was a kid and I've just forgotten. But no, this wasn't one that I regularly watched by any means. It wasn't until comparatively recently that it's gone into my rotation.
I am actually shocked at that. This is the first Satsunami exclusive.
There you go. I live to shock you.
Yeah, tell me, Adam, how was it like not having a childhood during Christmas time?
Yeah, it was pretty good, but you get used to it,
Oh, of course.
You can do a lot of things with lumps of coal. You'd be surprised.
See the fact that tradition, I say tradition, but it's a very bad one, of Santa giving like naughty kids coal on Christmas. Was that not like a good present back in the day?
Probably was. I presume that's how all these coal barons got their start. This free coal they were given by Santa.
Mr. Potters all over the world. Don't worry, we'll get to that film.
Where some people saw a punishment, he saw an opportunity.
It's like, those like self-help people you get on Instagram nowadays? Like, I can imagine it being them being like, I got a lump of coal for Christmas, but instead of whining about it, I turned it into an opportunity.
When life gives you a lump of coal, burn the ozone layer.
That is indeed true, yes. Brought to you by Satsunami.
Step 4, profit.
We've really got to work in the other steps. I think we're at step 4, and somehow we skipped all the other steps.
We only need step 4.
To be fair, that is true. Mr. Potters of the world who are listening to this, just give us a call, give us your profit, and you know what? We'll give you your coal back. Yeah, I'm actually really surprised, though, you got into it late. So, out of curiosity, what made you get into this film?
Well, I'm a huge Arnie fan, And so, for the most part, I prioritised watching his action films. And I kind of didn't watch many of his comedy films until later on. And then this happened to be one that, like, I'd seen my eye on, and it was Christmas time, and I thought, let's have a watch of this one. And I have to admit, like, it didn't really catch me the first time I watched it. It was only having gone back and watched it subsequently that I think it's now a masterpiece, a misunderstood masterpiece that more people need to appreciate.
I mean, I actually can't remember the first time I watched it, but it was definitely one of those films that I watched as a kid. I mean, that's probably aging me significantly. But I mean, it came out in 1996, 4 years shy of the millennium. And yeah, it's been one of those films that, although I wouldn't consider it, like, I consider it a really good Christmas film, but I wouldn't consider it as, like, you know, an ultimate, how to put this, like, I wouldn't say it's like a tearjerker, like it's the one where you rush your family into the room and be like, come on, we're all going to watch Jingle. Or maybe you would, because it is a good film, but it's not like It's a Wonderful Life or something like that.
Yeah, it's not quite
like,
that. It's not the final scenes of Home Alone. No, I'll give you that.
Oh, but that Home Alone, no, Chef Kiss, just so good. I actually need to watch that. That and A Muppet's Christmas Carol, both absolutely fantastic Christmas films. Yeah, I should probably point out that we aren't sponsored by any of these Christmas films. After all, why would we be? But if
Fire, please.
it's like, please, Santa, just all we want is a sponsorship for Christmas, please. Yeah, just burn this episode and put it up the chimney. I hear that's how they do it in some places, please. And yeah, I honestly can't remember. It's just, I remember this being one of the films that just was always there. It was always on, same with like The Grinch and all of that. Yeah, it's just such a fun film. Before we go into it, before we start talking about why Jingle All the Way is probably criminally, I wouldn't say, maybe not criminally underrated.
Oh, I'd use criminally, definitely.
I definitely think it's an underrated film. It is like one of those films where you watch it and you think, oh, this was a great film. And then you see other people like talk about the same film and they're like, this is terrible, it's trash and everything. And I'm sorry, like, to those people listening to this, have you seen Netflix? Have you seen the Christmas films on there? See, compared to that, it makes Jingle All the Way look like It's a Wonderful Life. And I'm not exaggerating. Some of those films are like, Mary was just a normal office woman. And then all of a sudden she went to, I don't know, she went to like this farm in Kentucky or something. And it's like, yeah, then she learned to love, blah, blah, blah. Santa hit her over the head, you know, the usual Christmas joy that you get in these like 20 similar films.
Yeah, people talk about this like it's like Kirk Cameron Saving Christmas. It's nowhere near that level of, you know, this film is genius. I will stand by it. Mm-hmm. So people who lambast it are fools. Yeah, I said it. You're all fools. Come at me.
There's that Christmas spirit. It's just as baffling. Like, I won't go on too long about it, but it is just baffling that people think that this film is terrible. As I said, it's not like the best or the most like heartwarming of Christmas films out there, but it's nowhere near as bad as like the vitriol and things like that that people bring to this film. Yeah, before we jump into it, will we just give a quick summary?
Let's go for it.
Basically, Home Alone, Jesus Christ.
Come on, man, get your head in the game.
Basically, Kirk Cameron Saving Christmas is about... you thought you were listening to Jingle All the Way.
Gotcha.
Gotcha. In the words of Arnie, you know, where's your Christmas cheer? So yeah, to give a brief synopsis, Jingle All the Way is about a workaholic father who is trying to bond with his son, played by the same kid that played Anakin Skywalker in Phantom Menace. Just wanted to throw that out there. Really weird when you see him. You're like, it's a kid from Star Wars that hated that film for obvious reasons. But that's another podcast episode. Yeah, it's about this workaholic father who his son asks him to get like a Turbo Man doll, which is like the doll of the year in the film, and of course he leaves it too late. And it leads him across the city and he's trying to buy this toy and yeah, hijinks ensue. Would you say that's a safe enough summary?
Yeah, no, I'd say you hit all the key points there.
There's a lot to get into. So yeah, before we, dive into the jingle bells of this film, yeah, we will be right back just after these messages. Welcome to Satsunami, a variety podcast that talks about topics from gaming and films to streaming and general interests.
Previously on Satsunami, we discussed Game of the Decade, Deadly Premonition, the romantic thriller Birdemic, and listen to us get all sappy as we discuss our top 5 Christmas films.
If that sounds like your cup of tea, then you can find us on Anchor, Spotify, YouTube, and all good podcast apps. As always, stay safe,
stay awesome, and most importantly,
stay hydrated.
We are Beer and Chill Podcast.
Podcast where we review TV shows, games, movies, and whatever else takes our fancy.
So what are you waiting for? If you're a cool kid like us, you're gonna listen to the Beer and Chill Podcast. You can get it anywhere from Spotify all the way to your grandmother's radio. My name is Jan.
And I'm Craigie C.
And we are
Beer and Chill.
And what holly jolly messages those were. My God, you could hang tinsel on those. So, yeah, Jingle All the Way. I want to hear your first impressions of this film. I was quite interested about something you said in the intro. You said that this is a film you watched much later on. Was it right to say you said that you weren't a fan of it in the first, viewing?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I wasn't a fan of it. It just kind of went in one ear and went out the other.
Oh, okay.
That kind of makes sense. I think I put it on while I was helping my mum put up the Christmas tree. So it was just kind of one of those things. It just kind of passed the time. I laughed at the jokes, but I didn't really because I wasn't fully concentrating on it. I didn't really get all of what the film was doing. That makes sense. Yeah. I didn't really get the whole story and its messages and stuff. So yeah, it was it wasn't like I didn't like it. It just was that kind of thing that it was just kind of past the time. And I said it was only subsequently when I went back and actually sat down and watched it properly, I was like, yeah, this is genius.
What changed your mind, if you don't mind me asking?
It was just watching it on repeated viewings and actually just focusing on it and just kind of looking at the actual heart of the film and what it has to say and everything. And honestly, one reason that I love this film so much is that it is honestly an excellent tonic for all the schmaltz of a usual Christmas film fare.
Yeah.
This Jingle All the Way is it's on a completely different track to basically 99% of all other Christmas films, and I love it for that. It's just the one that you can just it's that palate cleanser. It cuts right through the kind of sweet and saccharine tone of these other films, which is not a bad thing because Christmas films should most part have that kind of sugary sweet center to it. But I love this one for just the sharp bitter taste that just cuts through and gets you to the heart of what modern Christmas is like.
You do raise a good point. It's definitely different compared to a lot of films. As I was kind of joking about before, there's so many Christmas films I've seen where it's just rinse and repeat. It's borrowing plot points from other films. For example, It's a Wonderful Life. Fantastic film. I think it was what do I mean? I think no, it was our number one Christmas film because from a reliable source, me, myself, and I, genuinely, it is one of the best Christmas films of all time. I will still stand by that to this day.
Oh, definitely.
When you get other people trying to copy that, because there has been lots, you might be thinking, you're wagging your finger thinking, oh, Satsu, you lovable Grinch. No way. There is no way. Oh, trust me. I literally saw one where it was a businesswoman, again, a businesswoman in New York, and she walks through I think it's what's the park called in New York? Central Park, thank you. See, I should know that because I've got a Central Perk mug sitting right beside me. I'm Central so first of all, she walks through Central Park at night, which from what I've heard, not a good idea. Yeah, she walks through, she meets a guy who rides the horse and carriage, played by William Shatner. It was grim. It was a grim film, Not grim as in it was disturbing. It was just the same, as you said, schmaltzy, kind of sickeningly sweet. Oh, yay, Christmas is about family and things. And it's it is. There's a time and a place for it. But if every film is like that, then you're going to get bored, aren't you? You're just going to be this is what a Christmas film is. Jingle All the Way, I do agree. Jingle All the Way is, it's acted great. It's so over the top, but I think that plays into the strength of the film. Would you say the acting's on point for this film?
Here's what I'd say about I think I agree with you on the whole. I think the acting is on point. If we're being honest, I think Arnie is miscast in this film.
Ooh.
Like he is in most of his films. If we're being honest. This isn't a film that he should be in at all. I don't buy him for 1 second as a mattress kingpin. I mean, of all the film roles that Arnie has had, this isn't the most unbelievable.
No.
In the film True Lies, he plays a computer salesman. That is the most unbelievable role I've ever seen. But I don't buy him as a mattress kingpin. But that being said, he works surprisingly well in this film, and I think it's almost because of how miscast he is. Arnie's comedy it can never tell if he's a comedic genius or just what he does is just naturally funny and he doesn't mean it. But whatever reason it is, like, because he's so funny in this, it works so well, and you kind of like can look past the fact that he does not fit in this film at all. The late great Phil Hartman, who you may remember from such roles as Troy McClure and Lionel Hutz on The Simpsons, is just perfect as the sleazy neighbor Ted. I think he's maybe the highlight of the film. He is so good. Sinbad, who plays I've forgotten his second name now, who plays the postman Myron, who's kind of like the antagonist of this film, and is basically like finds himself like battling Arnie to get hold of this Turbo Man doll. He brings a kind of manic energy to the film. I think he can often stray into being quite irritating, and like, you know, but I think overall he works pretty well in the film, and he kind of works quite well when he's playing off Arnie. So I think overall the acting is good. I mean, Rita Wilson, Tom Hanks' wife, by the way, who plays Howard's wife in this film. She doesn't really get much to do. Like, she really is just like, all she gets to really do is nag Arnie and basically like fight off lecherous Ted throughout the film. She's not really given much to work with, which is a bit of a shame. But I think for like the three main, if you're looking at like Howard, Ted, and then Myron, kind of three main characters, I think they all work well for kind of different reasons.
Yeah, I see what you mean about his wife. She's just kind of there to be I suppose, just there to look after the child while Arnold goes in these like extravagant, like,
he shirks all his parental duties.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And remember, she's his number one customer. That's it.
I love that.
I think that's amazing because that's genuinely how I feel at work. I'm not a mattress salesman, but when I'm replying to emails, it's like, you know that way. Anybody who works in that kind of job where you're constantly replying to emails all day, you know, you always have that tagline at the end of your email. And it reminded me of that when he's just like, and remember, you're my favorite, you're my number one customer. And she just looks horrified and just slams. I think that's so funny. This film, would you say this film is definitely like a time capsule of the time? Like, don't get me wrong, I still think it's applicable to nowadays for Christmas, but do you think it's quite a time capsule?
In a way, but I think it's the most maybe relatable
of
Christmas. I think this is probably a Christmas story that a lot of people can relate to. I mean, like, it's obviously satirizing things like events such as like the Cabbage Patch riots that you got in the 1980s, where, if you remember the Cabbage Patch, not that we remember, if you've seen the Cabbage Patch Kids, which were absolutely like crazy, like absolute killer toy in the 1980s, and like parents were like trampling each other to like, you know, robbing each other to get hold of these for their kids. But I think as well, it also kind of presaged, and I don't know if Black Friday was a thing in 1996 or if it became a thing later on, but if it became a thing later on, then this film like presaged exactly what was going to happen, you know, for all of these, like, you know, all these kind of Black Friday events. So in a way it is a time capsule, especially as well with the kind of like 90s, you know, and I suppose for getting like a toy like that is very kind of a 90s toy. It kind of reminds me of when like the Buzz Lightyear toys were out, or like the Furbies, you know, something akin to that was very much a 90s craze everybody was trying to get their hands on. But in that idea of the kind of like must-have item, I think it's just as applicable today as it was in 1996.
Do you know, it's ironic you bring up the Cabbage Patch Kids, because in the same year there was another craze for a toy, and it was the Tickle Me Elmo doll. Like, genuinely, parents all over America and all over the world, like, I think it was more America, I can't like say for a fact it was like all over the world, but definitely America, they were scrambling for this toy, being like, oh no, we gotta get it. And I do agree, it's something that definitely carries over, because as I've said before, then this is like an example I always bring up, but for example, the Wii craze of 2006, and I don't mean Wii as in small, I'm not that Scottish, I mean the literal Nintendo Wii that was sold out. People had to ship it from Germany, of all places, because they had like tons of them for some reason in Germany, but nowhere else. So I had to ship it all the way from there to the UK in time for Christmas. It was like really hard. And again this year, I mean, look at the Xbox Series X, which, yeah, like, genuinely, I'm still waiting for Microsoft to reply and send me one. Unfortunately, they're not answering my emails. They sent me a letter the other day. It said cease and desist or something. I don't know what it means, but anyway, I'll look at it later. But the main thing is, Microsoft, please give me a free Xbox, because my Xbox One's on the blink, please. For just one Xbox Series X a day, you can keep my Satsu happy.
Please, sir, can I have one more?
What? Yeah, like again, going back to the point there, that like there's always going to be that like toy or gadget or something that's always going to be in high demand. I mean, there's always something every year, because I know people will be thinking, "Oh no, that's not the case," or "I would never rush out." Believe me, if you had kids. Or you see like all these shows for kids. That do you remember like years ago watching things like Cartoon Network and programs like that, the amount of like insidious adverts for toys on that, it was like there would be a cartoon, then there would be an ad break, but it's not like, for obvious reasons, it's not like, John Johnson, attorney at law or something, or are your feet hurting? Why not try a stair lift? Nothing like that. It's all like the high powered action toys and things like that. You've got your Lego, you've got your, oh god, I'm getting old thinking of toys, your fidget spinners and the flossing and the dancing. But you know what I mean?
Like I remember that, because I remember I desperately wanted the Lego Hogwarts set when every
Yeah.
year that came out, and that was like one of these ones. I remember my parents had to like go to, there used to be a big Toys R Us not far from us. Like they were phoning there every day to try and see if that was coming in. But I mean, that's kind of, the film satirizes that as well, because when Arnie's speaking to his kids, called Jamie, as you say, played by Jake Lloyd, and like he's like, "What do you want for Christmas?" And then like Jamie goes into that big speech, and he's like, "Oh, the Turbo Man," and he's listing all the features of it, like just exactly as you can imagine it was in the advert.
Yeah.
It ends with a batteries not included.
Yeah.
It's that kind of way of that, well, subliminal, but also very much in your face, advertising the mix of the two, and how like insidious it is for children, and how much they just pick up on that.
It is amazing though, just like how they captured it so well. Even as a parody or a satire or however you want to quote it, it's amazing, isn't it? How they just capture the essence, as it were.
Yeah, no, like it completely is. Like, and you can tell this is written by people who have experienced this.
Oh yeah.
If anything, this is such a human story in a way, because I guarantee so many parents will completely will know exactly what this is. Maybe not to this extreme, but they will understand that kind of like pressure to get this thing for your kid. And even if perhaps we haven't like experienced that like per se as a parent, we kind of know of it as being the child, and it's something we may end up having to do, as potential future parents. So it is a human story in that sense of, like it's not so much like, oh, like the best, the greater good of humans. It's more just that like the craze and like the pressure it is to be a human sometimes.
Oh yeah, there's no sappy like moral of this. It's like, do whatever you can to make your child happy.
That's what I find fascinating about this film. Like, just you bringing that up, there is almost a complete lack of any kind of festive cheer.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, the only kind of bit that you get is actually right after the credits. After the credits, there's like a scene in like the Langstrom family home where Arnie puts like the star on top of the tree. Really, that's kind of it. There's really not much else at all. I often term this film as like a refreshing slice of holiday cynicism. I'll list some of the things that are in the film here. So we have black market toy rings, we have crass consumerism, we have mail bombs, we have suburban sleaze, amongst a multitude of other things. The film actually has like it's a very dark core to it. If you think about it, for much as it's a comedy, there's this really kind of bleak like center to the film, because it's really a tale of like an absent father who can only think to use material items to win his son's affection. Like that's all he can do in his mind. He can't conceive of any other way to, like be the best father and like please his child. No, all he can think is, I must get these material items for him. So it's actually a really, really dark core. And like say, it's like the son, like it's a son who's clearly growing frustrated with like with his absent father, and is almost in search of a father figure himself, which is maybe one of the reasons he kind of latches onto Turbo Man as this like hero to look up to, because his own father isn't providing that. So it's actually really bleak if you think about it.
I remember reading some of the reviews, and it's all this stereotypical like, oh, this film has a terrible message, and oh, this film, is very this and that, and you think, well, it is a more real, as you said, it's a more realistic take on the holiday. And again, as you said, like, we're not speaking from the perspectives of being parents, but I can only imagine, like, seeing, when you go Christmas shopping to a supermarket, sorry, what toys am I buying? To, like, the malls or shopping centres hours or things like that. And, you know, you just see all the dejected parents walking by, trudging along with, like, I don't know, something from Build-A-Bear or, you know, from Game or something, and just being, like, totally dejected. And I'm not saying that as a critique, being like, oh, look at these people so sad. Like, I genuinely feel sorry, you know, that's kind of, because don't get me wrong, like, and this is the sappy message of this episode, but Christmas is like a kind of time of, you know, goodwill and faith and things. But it would not be right to say that it's not a materialistic holiday. It has definitely evolved into that. And the fact that, as you said, you've got this father figure played by Arnie, of course. He's doing his best to... No, sorry, he's not doing his best. As you actually said, I was going to be nice there, but no, he's not. He's a workaholic. He breaks the law to try and get back to his son's, like, karate recital. He doesn't get there. What seems to him like probably an insignificant moment, because does he not say that about the belts? He's like, oh, can he not come to the next one or something?
Yeah, he does.
And, you know, the mum's like, no, you have to be here for this one. And of course, as you said, the sleazy neighbour played by Phil Hartman, who he did a fantastic job. I'm sorry, he is the highlight of this film. He's like kind of the anti-Flanders, isn't he? You know, going for The Simpsons.
That's a perfect description.
He is like, think of Ned Flanders, you know, from The Simpsons, and just reverse that, like evil Flanders, if you will, where the only reason he's being nice to people isn't because he's genuinely nice. And that is something that's actually brilliant. You've probably noticed it, but there's a scene in the film where he's got like a reindeer, like a real life reindeer, kicking about the neighbourhood, and he's got like the manger scene, and he's giving out like hot chocolate and, you know, things like that. And all the women of like this suburban area are flocking around him. Jake Lloyd's character, Jamie turns around to the Phil Hartman's kid. I can't remember what his name is. Oh, that is terrible.
I don't think does he even have a name? I can't remember.
Johnny.
Phil Hartman.
No, it's Johnny.
Oh, is it Johnny?
Yeah,
Is it?
the only reason is I'm remembering that scene where he's like, I got Johnny a Turbo Man for Christmas. It's nestled safely under our tree. He's like, gee, you're great. But yeah, he's basically lapping up the attention. And obviously the only person who's not really buying it is Arnie's wife, who's keeping her distance. And Johnny says to Jamie, he's like, my dad never used to do this, but as soon as he got divorced, he started doing this all the time. I'm just laughing because of what he follows up with. He says, like, it did him the world of good. And he turns to Jamie and says, maybe your parents should get divorced, which is something that a child does not want to hear from anybody. And it is just that thing of he's just doing it for the attention, and he's the perfect, like, kind of, I mean, there's two villains in this piece, isn't there? There's Phil Hartman's character, and there's Sinbad, who plays Myron the postman, and they both are kind of evil in a different way. Like, obviously not comically evil. Well, Myron is, but we'll get to him. Will get to him. But for Phil Hartman's character, he's just this sleazy, he just does it so well. Like, I cannot emphasize enough how good of a job he does it. Like, for example, he goes to Arnie's house while he's absent, and just basically to weasel his way in. And it's just so funny when he's like, he says to the woman, oh, go take a shower, and, you know, I'll handle the cookies. And it's so funny. If you notice that, like, his facade drops immediately when he's left alone with the kids.
Yeah.
Because he's like, you go upstairs, put your feet up, have a nice shower, I'll deal with the cookies. And as soon as she's out of earshot, the kids are like fighting with one another, and he yells out, it's like, pipe down in there. And of course he gets a phone call from Arnold. he's like
that cookie scene is probably my favourite in the whole film, where he's like, oh my god,
can we talk about that scene?
Of course we can. It's bloody amazing.
Yeah, so in the scene, just for context, Howard, of course, played by Arnie. I just realised I've just been calling him Arnie or Arnold, not Howard. Because let's face it, like, we know his names.
We'll just call him Arnie from here on.
Yeah. But yeah, so Arnie, like, phones home, and of course Phil Hartman's character answers it. Oh, it's so funny. And he's like eating his wife's cookies, and Arnie's just raging because he's like, who told you you could eat my cookies? And he just keeps saying, like, well, I could check on your wife. I think she's in the shower. And he gives the most sleazy smile, and he's like, do you want me to check? And he's like, no. He screams it down the phone, and all of these, like, people beside him look at him as if he's gone mad, and he's like, no, no, Ted. No, Ted, thank you. And then, of course, you've got the iconic put that cookie down line, which is fantastic.
Oh, it's so good. But I think that's what works actually kind of well about the two villains, about Ted and Myron. And that they're actually both broken men.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
as much as they are like antagonists and
Mhm.
aren't like, for the most part, aren't like good people. As we said, like Ted is this way because of his divorce, which has clearly like broken him in many ways, like obviously mentally as well. Like, and he's just like trying to overcompensate. And as you say, he's just attention hungry, you know, and loving like the attention from all the suburban housewives as he lusts after, like, you know, his next door neighbor. And then Myron as well, like, you know, we get there's a scene where like Myron and Arnie have struggled, like can't find this doll at all, and they both end up in the same diner, and they're like commiserating and feeling sorry for themselves. And Myron tells the story about how his dad didn't get him like the toy, the hot item, the hot toy, and he's like, and that's why I became a mailman. I was like, well, guess who my next door neighbor was? Like, he's now the CEO of this like $1 billion corporation because his dad got him the toy. Which, in one level, if you look at it at face value, you're like, well, that's a terrible message. It's like, if you don't like buy material items for your kid, they're going to be a failure in life. But actually, I think it's something deeper, and like it's this way of, it's not actually anything about getting the toy. It's that clearly, like, you know, Myron's father was like how it was like Arnie's character was like absent, and, you know, didn't show the necessary care and like affection for his child, which has kind of like resulted in Myron like struggling in life. And it's that way that, like, rather than like focus on that, it's kind of become revolved around this item, you know, this toy, in a way that like a child's mind perhaps would do, you know. And then, you know, it's difficult to break out of that mindset even as you grow up. So again, it's just it's such a dark film that I don't think you quite get it maybe on the first viewing. I think it's only on repeated viewings that you kind of get a peer into the abyss which sits in the center of this film. And again, it's just something that like I find like refreshing is like such a bizarre word to use, but it just really is. It's just like, it's an actually fascinating study of like what the holidays can do to people in a way, and the kind of hurt and the kind of craziness it can cause.
Do you want to know an interesting fact about that scene?
I'll go for it.
So, the toy that he was talking about in the diner is the Johnny 7 OMA gun, or OMA gun, however you say it. OMA means one-man army. So it was like kind of probably like the Swiss Army knives of guns kind of thing. But the interesting thing is, that's a real toy.
Oh, really?
That was a real toy, yeah. Apparently it says it was released in 1964, so it's quite an old toy. But yeah, apparently, I was reading up the trivia for this, and that's what they were saying. The advert was exactly how Myron describes it, you know. Johnny the Peter, Roger. And he does the whole, like, spew.
Oh my god, I'm looking at the gun.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the toy now. Holy crap.
It's a piece of work, yeah.
I kind of want one.
Yeah, okay.
Add this to my Christmas list.
Damn, I've already bought your Christmas. You know what? I'll see what Santa can bring.
If you don't get me a Johnny 7 OMA, then I'm going to become a postman as well and blame you.
Well, if you do, I'm not opening any presents from you. Here's this lovely parcel. Ignore the ticking. Can we just talk about how dark that scene is, by the way?
Yeah.
There's a scene which I have to admit I did chuckle, and it's played for laughs, thank God, because I don't think I could have taken it. I think I would have killed the film if they took it as a serious, like, bomb thing. But basically, there's a scene where they break in, like, this is how desperate they are. They break into this, like, radio station who are doing this, like, giveaway for a Turbo Man doll, and they're, like, banging. It's hilarious, because it's, imagine you're a radio DJ, and you're just doing your show, you're just going about your everyday life, and then Arnold Schwarzenegger comes out and he's banging on the glass door.
On a Blitzen Ratzer Pranzer.
Yeah. You're too late. I know. I won. He's like, did I get it? And it's like, oh my, that would be terrifying for anyone. But the poor guy. But yeah, he calls the police on them and they have to escape. And just as they get caught by the police, like the first time when Myron's trying to get the Turbo Man doll, he pulls out like a random package and said it's a parcel bomb. You know, like he is really, like yelling at them to get down, and he accidentally drops it and it turns out to be a music box. But then he tries the same thing with the police, and the police obviously they take it seriously and they put their guns down, and he puts the parcel down and he runs off. And you know, like the confident police chief, who, can I just say, he was just doing his job throughout the entire film. He gets the harsh end of the stick in this film, but he ends up yeah, he ends up being like, in all my years of the bomb squad, I'm sure it's fine. And then you just see in the distance this explosion, and Sinbad goes, that really was a bomb. There are sick people in this world. Which I have to admit, it did get a chuckle out of me. And it does cut back, and the police officer's fine. He's got the cartoony, like, the kind of black suit all over his face, and the hair's all done up, as if it's like a cartoon bomb that's exploded. Which, thank God they went that route, and they just didn't, they didn't.
Blood plastered up the wall.
Yeah, like Die Hard style. It's like, oh my God. Oh, it's such a funny scene, though. As you said, it just continues that kind of dark tone. It's kind of strange how, although there's such a dark tone, it's like juxtaposed with this glittery, bright kind of backdrop. You've got Turbo Man, who is basically like the Power Rangers almost. That's the kind of closest I can think of, like, for what he's representing. He's like the typical superhero where he's got he's got his utility belt, he's got, God, I'm reading the advert now, he's got the karate chop, batteries not included, and so forth. And yeah, he's just like this stereotypical toy, and he's got a sidekick who's like this fluffy, like pink saber tooth, let me add, called Booster. That's one of my favourite running jokes in this, because like every time they go to, like, all these angry parents go to like a toy store, they all want Turbo Man, because obviously you want, like, as you brought up earlier, it's like going for Buzz Lightyear and getting the pig instead. Maybe the pig is possible, but no one wants the pig from Toy Story compared to Buzz Lightyear or Woody, or like, it is. It's so funny because they keep saying we've got, and then there's a great guy who's like, who runs like one of the malls, and he's like, but we've got Turbo Man's faithful sidekick, Booster, and everyone's like, nobody wants Booster, nobody wants him. And they're like, yeah, no one wants Booster, and you're like, oh my God, it is great. And throughout the whole thing, even at the end when they're fighting on the float, and all these kids run up to this poor guy, who I'm convinced is Gilbert Gottfried, but I could be wrong. It's the same voice. Yeah, because he gets the absolute you-know-what kicked out of him by these kids. Everyone's like, nobody likes you, Booster. Oh, poor, well, I would say poor guy, but he's a bit of a, he's not very, not Booster himself, but the guy in the suit at the end, he's not a very nice man. But yeah, as I said, it's like all of this, well, what Christmas is like. It's, the tinsel coming down, the red and the golds and the greens and things, just all flashing. And you just see, like, in fact, I find it kind of funny. See the scene where he, of course, tries to go and get like a raffle, and it's just chaos. It's, as you said, it's like Black Friday, where they throw all of these balls with numbers on them, and whoever gets the ball with the right number gets the turbo. In fact, no, it's not a number. Is it like a star or something like that?
Yeah, I think it has got a number on it, actually. I think it is like, it's almost like bingo balls or something like that.
He tries grabbing, like, everyone's grabbing them, and there's the iconic line, he got two, as he yells at Myron, and he gets, like, basically mobbed. It's a very dark scene. And then, of course, he tries to get it from a child, which, yeah, you can guess how that goes. A fully grown man crawling into a ball pit trying to get a ball off a child, it does not end well. He gets beaten.
I'm not above it.
And then, of course, he gets lured in by this shady Santa. As you said, the whole Santa ring. What do you think about that scene?
I love it for, like, again, just the bleak, like, there's this, like, crime ring of Santas just, like, making all these counterfeit toys. I think is a funny kind of, like, image. And then as well, like, I love, like, the kind of fight scene that happens. Because I actually think there's some really good action scenes, like, kind of peppered throughout this film. Like, obviously, Arnie's probably best known for his action films, Commando, Predator, Terminators, things like that. But, like, obviously this isn't an action film, but I think there's some really good, like, scenes. That fight I think is great. Like, I love the kind of, like, I love the whole wave when he's getting, like, mobbed by the Santas, and then the police break it all up and stuff, and then, and as well, like, as you said, I love the chase, like, when he's chasing that ball, like, down, and he's like crawling through, like, the kids' play, but I think it's a really funny image of this, like, giant, like, hulking Austrian, like, crawling through these tunnels and everything, and then just getting attacked by all these, like, mums.
Oh.
I think it's just funny. Like, I really like it. I really enjoy it.
I mean, I'm just trying to think of that. So, like, maybe it goes on a bit too long, but my favourite moment of that whole, like, sequence, not only when he says, like, forget it, I'm not sitting on your lap, to the shady Santa. I love it. Of all things, like, I didn't say it to Santa, but I remember I was out with my girlfriend and we were walking about, and there was this, like, Santa's grotto, and she said, like, jokingly, oh, do you want to go in? And I was like, listen, if it's a 10-year-old child sitting on Santa's lap, that's cute. If it's a nearly 30-year-old man sitting on Santa's lap, it's a criminal offence, okay? It's the same with Arnold, you know? It's like, yeah, whether or not he was going to sit in that guy's lap, that's such a good scene, though. But my favourite bit is when he actually gets his hand on a Turbo Man doll, which turns out to be a counterfeit. Basically, it's all wrapped up and they, like, take $200 for it. And he hears, like, this weird, you know, sound. He's like, what is that? And he tears it open and it starts speaking in Spanish and he presses the button and all you hear is like, es el tiempo del turbo. It's like, oh yes, that's a multilingual version. It's educational. You're like, oh, sleazy con man.
It's when the head falls off and he's like, oh yeah, well, some assembly required, obviously.
And of course, Arnie's like not someone you want to piss off. You know, as you said, hulking Austrian is perfect to describe him in his prime. Because I think at this time he was making all of his like but his like family-friendly comedies.
Yeah, I think Twins is around this time. Twins is around this time. Junior as well, the one where he gets pregnant. Last Action Hero as well, I think, is not long for, which is like the kind of like crossover, which is my favorite of the Arnie comedies, but it's like crossover comedy action, which is another one that I really, really like. But as you say, it's all like this kind of like early to mid 90s.
Yeah, it's definitely him and his, I don't want to say comedy prime, but you know what I mean. That kind of genre that he was exploring, you think?
Comedy era.
Yes, this bookmark, as it were. Although, a quick like aside, but speaking of the cast, did you know that there were like other considerations about which actor should play like certain characters in this film?
I did not. Who were they thinking?
The most noticeable was Myron, who apparently the producer Chris Columbus, who I was surprised because Chris Columbus did the first two, I think it was the Harry Potter films.
Yeah, he did Home Alone as well, didn't he?
So he did, yeah. He is a talented guy, props to him. But yeah, he did that, and apparently they wanted Joe Pesci to play Myron. But this is what it says in IMDb, so if you don't believe me, look it up, everybody listening. Producer Chris Columbus wanted Joe Pesci to play Myron, but he was deemed too short at 5'3", next to Arnold Schwarzenegger, who is 6'2". Can I just say, I didn't realise I was the same height as him.
I'm surprised he's that like that. I say that short, but you know, like I would have thought he was taller than that.
Yeah, I thought he was taller. But yeah, can you imagine Joe Pesci playing Myron? Like maybe I think he might have worked actually.
I would have loved it. I think that would have been incredible. Like a manic Joe Pesci would have been amazing to watch. Like no offense to Sinbad, but I do, as I say, like as much as I think he does work in this film, I do think he does border into the irritating at points in a way that I think Joe Pesci would have like walked that line much better.
No, I totally agree. I mean, especially after like the leading from the Home Alone, the only two Home Alone films, there was never any sequels, which is a shame. There was never any reboots.
There definitely wasn't one released this year.
Yeah, and there wasn't one with a dog or dogs. No, if you want to check out that non-existent film, you know, check out our episode on that.
Horror.
Yep. Yeah, horror.
You want to watch a man get barbecued alive?
Yeah, or a lawn dart up the ass, then yeah, that's your...
Quickly move along.
Yeah. So as a kind of closing, or not a closing, because let's face it, we could talk about this film for hours, but can we talk about like one final part of this film?
Let's go for it.
That, of course, being the finale. The utter bonkers. The bit that I honestly don't think fits into the rest of the film, I'm going to be honest. It seems a bit whimsical. Not like the ending of it. Like, I feel as if... So, sorry, just to quickly explain. Arnie, you know, here's another dark twist coming, or a dark plot point, but basically he tries to break into his neighbour's house, you know, the lecherous one, and he tries to steal a Turbo Man doll on Christmas Eve from under the tree. And he gets rightfully called out for it. And although I did love Phil Hartman's response, he's like, you can't bench press your way out of this.
That's such a great line.
It's so fun. It's as if like he has the upper hand, and it's like, oh, Ted, you really don't. It's so funny. To which he punches a reindeer in that scene as well, which is very jarring.
I think where he boots the flaming wise man's head out the window into that group of carolers, which I love. They'll run away screaming.
Did you hear what Phil Hartman says to that? He's like, Balthazar! Apparently, and again, we're not sponsored by anybody, especially beer companies. Apparently, I don't know if this film was filmed in Minnesota.
I think it was.
I think it was, because the only reason I say that is there's like a lot of references to Minnesota. And don't get me wrong, I don't know the first thing about Minnesota, so apologies to all our Minnesota. What would you call someone from Minnesota?
Minnesotians?
Please let us know down in the comments.
I butchered that completely.
Prove your worth as a Minnesotan. But yeah, apparently, see the scene where he pours out like a beer and shares it with the reindeer?
Yeah.
That's one of the trivia points, that apparently it's a classic Minnesota beer. It's still very popular today.
Oh, nice.
And it's like a tiny... I have to admit, there's something kind of cute and quaint about that they have these kind of like mini nods to Minnesota and like the place they're filming it. I do like that. I think that's a really nice touch. Anyway, sorry, moving on from that. It ends up he's running from the police again. He bumps into the police officer, who at this stage has been blown up. His bike's been knocked over. He's been scalded with hot coffee. And he ends up getting into this dressing room where he is dressed up as Turbo Man. And I do love the guy saying like, oh, by the way, you know, it's so good you could fill in for so-and-so before he's still in the hospital. It's like, wait, what?
He showed signs of brain activity, which is a good thing.
That's a good thing. You're like, oh no. And he ends up, which, so funny. He ends up being dressed as Turbo Man in one of the... It's not the Macy Day Parade, but it's something similar.
Akin to that, yeah.
Is this the one where Sonic the Hedgehog is in the parade?
Yes, it is.
Right, no, that's fine, because I remember there was another one. I couldn't remember if it was this one or Miracle on 34th Street. Maybe there is one. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, this was the 90s, so it made sense. Yeah, Sonic and Crayola and all these other things.
So many crayons.
Yeah, I don't get that. Why were there so many crayons?
I don't understand, but I love
And
it.
people dressed as parcels, which is one of the... Is that the one? Is that the same scene I'm thinking of where a guy gets knocked down as a parcel and his wee legs are flailing?
Yeah,
They
all
all-
the other parcels kind of gather around.
Is that... I'm sorry, Billy. It's your time. But yeah, it's like he ends up dressing as Turbo Man, and I have to admit, it is a dick move, although this is in character for Howard. The fact he's just like, oh, I'll pick my own son, Jamie, and it's like, how does he know my name? And it's like, that is staged. It's so staged. And he was about to like out himself before Myron came in, after he kidnapped a man, can I just say,
Yep.
for a toy.
Myron racks up quite the criminal record.
Oh, yeah.
in this film.
Yeah, let's just say that, see if this was like in real life, Myron would probably still be in prison today.
Yep.
I mean, he blows up the police, he kidnaps a guy and ties him up and then steals his uniform. Or not his uniform, but the villain of, I can't even remember what he's called, isn't it?
He's called Dementor, isn't it?
Dementor, yeah. Oh, you're right, yeah, the
I
big
presume
grey
J.K.
guy.
Rowling stole from to Harry Potter.
Yeah, it ends up, and it's just so funny. It ends up they have like they don't really have a fight, because he's like trying to break away from what everyone else thinks like a choreographed skit. It ends up like, I love this scene, by the way, because it's so dumb, but it's when the police officer sees a 10-year-old boy run on top of a building. He's hanging off of it, and the child's mum is like trying to like rush past to get her child, and the police officer stops her and is like, ma'am, I'm sorry, you can't come this way. And she's like, but that's my son. And he's like, oh, he's doing a great job, part of the show. And it's like, how can you think this is part of the show? Oh, and then of course he uses his jetpack, Arnie uses his jetpack, which let's face it, some places don't even have the budget to cover potholes. How could you know what? That's a minor nitpick. I mean, and just like he manages to use this jetpack and save his, And I have to admit, there is like a nice symbolism there. Jamie throughout the film is looking up to Turbo Man, and then by the end of it, although he is looking up to Turbo Man is his dad and all of this. And I know that's the kind of like, as you said, the kind of smooshy ending, but Howard, even after this, Howard is not a nice man.
No.
Like, he's not he's not a Ted. He's not Phil Hartman's character. But he's not, I don't think that this makes up for years of neglect.
No, but that's as well, like, you're completely right, but as well, like, it shows how little he's actually emotionally grown. Because as much as he has like, going back to that diner scene, he has a scene where, like, just before he's been trying to, like, he's trying to call his wife through a lot of the film to say he's probably, like, oh no, I'll be there soon, no problem and stuff, but he keeps getting hold of his son, and he's, like, desperately trying to speak to his wife, but his son's, like, talking about, like, oh, you come to see the parade and stuff, and I can't wait to see Turbo Man, and, like, and Arnie just flips out, and he's just like, I had enough of Turbo Man! Like, he's just yelling at his kid up until, like, like his kid like is really angry at him and like slams the phone down, and he goes off and he's commiserating with Myron, and he's like, does it make me a bad father that I couldn't get this toy? No, but like, shouting at my kid for no reason, that's what makes me a bad father. And you almost think that's gonna be a moment of emotional growth where he kind of realizes, like basically like he's trying to cover up his failings, all his material items, but then he spends the rest of the film trying to get hold of this doll, and again that's all he can conceive of at the end of the day. He's just like, again, he's like, no, if I get this doll, everything will be fine. And actually, like, not to jump too far ahead to the end, but actually it's his son who has like the big emotional growth at the end rather than like Arnie's character.
Yeah, because he gives the doll away. Yeah, to someone who's obviously going to prison for, I mean, I don't know the American legal system, but judging by their like harsh penalties, I would assume at least 100 years.
Yeah. And do you know where that doll's going? Right into the evidence room.
Yeah. Well, then again, I don't know, maybe the police were corrupt and be like, yes, I got a Turbo Man for my son. The true crime.
That would have been a great twist of like, if like, the police, the like police chief who Arnie keeps like wrecking his life and so keeps like running into. If he'd been a bigger character and he'd also been looking for the toy, this was his like plan together, that'd have been an amazing twist.
See, from start to finish, it is a roller coaster.
I love it.
It is kind of ironic that he does become like the plastic icon of materialism that his son looks up to. And I know, this is sappy. Why do I want a Turbo Man doll? I've got the real one at home. And it's like, you do know your dad's not Turbo Man, Jamie.
He takes that suit off.
Yeah, it's like Jingle All the Way too. They have to take Jamie to a therapist and be like, right, Turbo Man's not real, right? Although, fun fact, there is actually a Turbo Man 2, I was about to say. There is actually a Jingle All the Way 2. Nothing to do, I've never seen it, nor do I have really any intention to, but it's nothing to do with the original. It's one of these cash grab ones, I think, where they just use the name. Like Bone Alone, for example.
If there ever was an example of crass consumerism, I think it's Jingle All the Way too.
Have you seen it?
No, but just from what I can imagine, just you kind of describing it there and what I can imagine it's like, I'm just like, oh, they clearly didn't watch the first one and understand its criticism and commentary. But here's a quick question for you: who's more excited about the discovery that Arnie is Turbo Man? Is it his son or is it his wife? He's like, Howard.
Wow. Again, that will probably be brought up in the sequel where it's like, you do know your husband's not Turbo Man. You do know that we're going to have to put the suit back, and there's probably going to be a long legal process about your husband. I mean, although it was the 90s, although it was a different time, it wasn't that different that the police didn't say maybe stealing someone else's identity, unwillingly, but stealing someone else's identity and flying through the city. It wasn't very legal. But you know what? As you said, he hangs the star on the tree at the end and everything, and it's all happy. And then, of course, she turns around and says, "What did you get for me?" And yeah, Jingle All the Way 2 focuses on their like heavy divorce, where he has to dress up as a female nanny to get their affection. No, sorry, that's Mrs. Doubtfire. Never mind.
Imagine if already been a Mrs. Doubtfire.
Can I just say, on a slight tangent here, I showed my partner that film for the first time the other day, thinking, oh, it's gonna be a very funny film and everything. That film is dark. That is like so grim. Have you rewatched that recently, like in the last 5 to 10 years?
I saw it for the first time a couple of years ago.
Really?
Yeah,
wow.
It is quite dark. Be honest.
Like, people say that online, they're like, oh, it's like a gritty, like, or not gritty, but like a harsh look at like divorced parents and things. And you're like, yeah, of course, sure it is. It's a silly comedy with Robin Williams. How dark can it be? Oh, okay, I see. I see what you mean now. Going back to Jingle All the Way again, though, everybody in that film is just irredeemable. Maybe except the mum. But the mum's like bland as it is at the beginning. She's just, as you said, she's just there.
Yeah.
She's not there to really, again, no like offense to the actress, like you can only work with what you're given, but yeah, she definitely does not do anything other than, as you say, scold him, rightfully so.
Oh, yeah.
I think her lines are like, "You got the doll, right? Turbo Man, you can't be late for Jamie's recital. Howard. And maybe a few like rebuttals for Ted, which there's a very creepy scene, I will admit, where he tries to like advance on her and she smacks his face, and it is like quite uncomfortable when you watch. You're like, okay, it's played for laughs, obviously, but you're like,
the bit where he's like, I could have any woman I want. You're like, holy crap, Ted.
There is one funny line she comes away with where she turns around and she goes, "Well, I'm a lucky girl," like really sarcastically. I'll admit, I did chuckle at that. I thought, okay, she has a little bit more, but like, yeah, obviously she wouldn't have as much of a starring role because, the focus is Arnold being a questionable parent, Phil Hartman being a questionable creep, Myron being a questionable postman, because I don't believe any of his parcels were delivered. People say this, people complain about the Royal Mail service in the UK. See if you had like Myrons in America. It's like people are like, oh, my parcel got lost by like Hermes or something. It's like, this is why. Because your postman was looking for Turbo Man. Yeah, he didn't get a Johnny 7 OMA gun. That's the kind of domino effect. Is it the domino effect or the butterfly effect? Probably the same thing.
A bit of
In
both.
this case. Yeah, it's like, this is the reason why your present's late and your grandmother didn't get your Christmas card. Because this guy was trying to blow up the police. And you're like, yeah, very grim. But overall, as a kind of, holly jolly closing point where we get a hot chocolate out and we reminisce about this film, how would you sell this? What are your final thoughts on this film?
Again, I would say just if you've just had enough, if you've had enough of Christmas being the time, like best time of year, and if you've had enough of the sweet saccharine nature of everything, pop this on your streaming service of choice, or pop the DVD in if you've got it, whatever, the VHS if you want a deep cut, but whatever, get it on. And it'll be a refreshing change, and you'll have a blast with it. And I think one thing that actually makes this film really great is that literally this is one you can watch with the whole family. It is like I think it's a PG rating, if I remember rightly. It's a lot of, obviously, as you say, you watched it when you were young. I obviously came to it in later life, and it's one that you can watch the whole family because there's so many different. It's a good film in that way that there's things for different people. Like, so the kids are gonna like all the kind of wacky comedy and the pratfalls and everything like that, and Arnie running around and screaming, and the adults will get a kick out of all the dark humor that comes out of like these suburban housewives lusting after Phil Hartman, and all these things. Another film that's kind of akin to this is Bad Santa. I don't know if you've ever seen that one with Billy Bob Thornton.
Do you know, I haven't seen it. I've been meaning to watch it for ages, but I actually haven't seen it.
It's the same kind of, it has that same kind of dark center to it. However, that's not one that you could watch with all your family. I will say, it is a good film, and I think it is worth a watch. But again, it's not really one that you could show kids or anything like that. It is rated 15, and quite rightly so, to be honest. So at least with Jingle All the Way, it is one that you can pop on for the family, and everybody can kind of enjoy different parts of it. And that's what I think makes a good kind of family film. It's got stuff for everybody, every member of the family. So that's two things I'd sell it with. A refreshing change of pace and good fun for all the family.
Speaking of films that are like this, because let's face it, although whether you like this film or not, it still has a formula that works. Jaded parent wants thing for child's Christmas, can't get thing, goes on wacky adventure, comes back, gets thing in the end. The only reason I say that is because it reminds me of another film that I actually watched quite recently, and it was made for British television called Click and Collect.
Oh, I remember you saying this one.
Yeah, have you seen it yet?
No, I keep meaning to watch it because I've heard good things about it.
I think it's on UK Netflix. I don't know if it would be on BBC iPlayer for any UK listeners out there. To kind of quickly summarise it, it's basically a short film about 53 minutes long, starring Stephen Merchant and, apologies if I mispronounce his name, Azam Chandra, who both are neighbours with one another, and Stephen Merchant is this kind of jaded father who's he goes to pick up his child's toy, and they bump up the price, and he's like, I'm not paying for this, and he storms out, and then he realises, oh shit, I'm gonna get this present. So he's well-meaning but annoying kind of obnoxious neighbour is oh, don't worry, I've reserved one for a shop in Cardiff. It's 4.5 hours away, come on, let's drive. And they have this kind of road trip, a bit well, maybe not like planes, trains and automobiles, a bit more family friendly, and it's got a very sweet ending. That what I will say is, although it has the consumerism angle, it does have a sweeter ending, and it's great comedy. Honestly, it's absolutely fantastic. I love it. I do think it's really good, but it's very kind of akin to this, where it's again a father figure who's having to do everything to try and get this toy, including driving up the M whatever. He's driving up the motorway on this buggy. He's trying to get this plastic, just this horrible plastic toy. Same with Turbo Man. It's he's just a plastic action figure. But of course the kids, the toy of Christmas is what makes Christmas for some kids. kids.
Yeah.
Whether it's like a status thing or you get that every year, don't you? There's always that one toy, whether it's a game console, whether it's like a toy. Because let's face it, it's more technology nowadays, isn't it?
Yeah, it is more tech-based than your kind of like plastic, block in whatever shape.
Because the one thing I will say about Click and Collect, and I swear this is the last point I'll I'll praise it for, is it updates Jingle All the Way in a really good way. Because I always thought, like, how would Jingle All the Way be done nowadays? Because let's face it, see shopping in the 90s versus shopping nowadays. Nowadays you can click a button
That's
and
true.
it's on your doorstep the next day. So you think, how could he do the same thing? Because both films take place on Christmas Eve and, he has to find a Turbo Man doll at the very last minute. Rightfully, he gets laughed at, which is a great scene. Do you remember that? It's like, where's your holiday spirit? As he grabs two guys, it's like, this is not the man you want to piss off today. But yeah, Jingle All the Way, honestly, just such a classic film. As you said, I would definitely recommend it. It's pretty much the Christmas salt of like our collection of films. As we are just about to wrap up for this episode, next week we are going to have a bit of a more sappy episode. We are going to be talking more about a film that is a Christmas film rather, that is very near and dear to our hearts. Would you like to give our listeners at home a little clue?
Indeed. So Satsunami and I have a rare treat for you. Our dear listeners just need to say the word. We're going to throw a lasso around the moon and pull it down for you.
And with that, stay safe, stay awesome, and most importantly, stay hydrated.